This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. Chris Graham going solo today. We'll talk some UVA basketball. We got a little bit of UVA basketball news. And you know, it's still the silly season in sports podcasting, so we'll go with what we got. Two bits of news today. We'll actually start with the news about the release of the non-conference schedule. So we've kind of known the makeup, for the most part, of the non-conference schedule. We knew about the battle for Atlantis opening game, Middle Tennessee. Other teams in that field include Florida, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Stanford, Butler, Dayton. Good matchups there, potentially, certainly in that battle for Atlantis. And we also knew about the ACC Big Ten Challenge game at Maryland in late November. So we knew those games were coming out. That's four of the games. You know, Middle Tennessee, Maryland, and then two teams based on the Battle for Atlantis bracket after Middle Tennessee. But we got the rest of the schedule now, and you know, it is what it is. Opener is Tuesday, November 6th. Boy, it gets earlier and earlier every year. November 6th, season opener at home is Towson, and then George Washington coming to JPJ on November 11th. Coppin State on November 16th. So, you know, a few games there, early season succession. Then there's a trip to the Battle for Atlantis in the Bahamas, November 21st. That's the 21st, 22nd, 23rd. The game at Maryland is the 28th. Then you've got Morgan State on December 3rd. VCU, interesting home matchup. The return of the home and home from last year when UVA won in the Siegel Center. December 9th, VCU comes to JPJ. Road game at South Carolina on December 19th. That should be an interesting test early in the season on the road. So, and then you finish up the non-conference December 22nd, William & Mary, and the 31st, Marshall. And then ACC play starts. Marshall went 27-11 and went to the NCAA tournament. There are 3 teams in the NCAA tournament from the Battle for Atlantis. Middle Tennessee was 25-8. Outside looking in, NCAA tournament got to the second round of the NIT. And, of course, you got Maryland, VCU. VCU coming off of a downer of a season for the Rams, but, you know, VCU's VCU. And that was a tough game, actually, last year in the Siegel Center. I was there covering that game. A 76-67 final. Kyle Guy, 29 points. Really sort of a coming-out party kind of game for Kyle in that one. And that was a nice win early in the season for that, at that point, young UVA team that, of course, went on to have the great regular season. So, yeah, some interesting matchups. I mean, Middle Tennessee, the potential matchups down the road in the Battle for Atlantis after that first game there. You're at Maryland. You're at South Carolina. This won't be an easy schedule for Virginia. And then, of course, you know about the ACC schedule because the ACC is the ACC. The home matchups this year, you got Duke for 2 games. You got Louisville, of course. Louisville's our designated rival opponent, I guess you want to call it. Notre Dame and Virginia Tech also. So those are the 4 home and homes. And then Virginia hosting Miami, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Wake, and Pitt. And then road games at Carolina, at Clemson, at NC State, at Syracuse, at BC, Boston College. Those dates have not been announced. The ACC schedule will be announced a little later on. But, you know, so yeah, I mean, you know, tough schedule. You got 2 games with Duke, 2 with Louisville, 2 Notre Dame, 2 Virginia Tech. I think all 4 of those teams are certainly, I mean, potential NCAA teams. Duke, a probable top 5 national team. Louisville with the new head coach. They're probably a team that's going to be a top 25 preseason. I think Virginia Tech's probably top 25 preseason. And so, you got those games. You got Marshall. You got South Carolina. You got Middle Tennessee. You got Maryland. It's a tough schedule for this Virginia team. A Virginia team that we know returns a lot. You're going to miss Devin Hall. You're going to miss Isaiah Wilkins, but you get more minutes out of DeAndre Hunter. You get what you expect, hopefully, out of Kyle Guy and Ty Jerome, who is a subject of our other news of the day. So let's go skip over to talking about Ty. And Ty invited to the CP3, my internet to work here, which I'm not getting to work. He was invited to the CP3 Elite Basketball Camp. It starts today. We're talking in this podcast on August or November. I'm already thinking November because I'm wanting it to be basketball season so bad. It starts August 1st, which is today as we're recording this podcast, and runs through August 4th, but runs through the weekend. And it's a pretty prestigious deal for Ty to have been invited to this camp. I've not been able to pin these details down. The CP3 Elite Basketball Academy Elite Guard Camp website says 10 college guards and 20 high school guards, and then I've seen other media reports talk about 20 college guards. So I'll just leave it at it's elite. Chris Paul, it's one of his ways of giving back. I think it's a really neat thing. Paul now, I mean, it's hard to think because if you watched ACC basketball, as, like I have for a long, long time, you still kind of think of Chris Paul as an ACC guy. He played 2 years at Wake Forest, of course, was a star player there. I think there was a time, a several-year period when he was in the middle of his career with the Los Angeles Clippers that I thought Paul was the best point guard on the planet. He was the point guard on a couple of Olympic teams that won gold medals. And, as he's later in a career now, he's a 13-year NBA veteran, 9-time All-Star. He's still an elite point guard. I'm not sure, he's not the best point guard in the world anymore, but, Kyrie Irving, notwithstanding, he's still one of the top, 3-4 guys in the league at that position. And he says he does this elite guard camp to sort of pay it forward. He talks about when he was at Wake, he studied a film of guys like Jason Kidd, Steve Nash, Tony Parker. Tony Parker's still in the league, by the way, talking about the longevity of his career. So he started this camp early in his own NBA career, did Chris Paul. And some of the alums, I mean, Steph Curry went through this camp. Steph Curry, we forget about Steph. Steph's an NBA MVP. He's won 3 rings now with the Golden State Warriors. But you forget that Virginia Tech famously wouldn't recruit him. Del Curry's son. Del Curry, you're the best player who ever played at your school, and they wouldn't recruit his son when Seth Greenberg was the coach there. Seth Greenberg recruited him. Seth Greenberg's still the coach at Virginia Tech, and they've probably got a statue of the guy out in front of Castle Coliseum, but no, didn't recruit him. Steph ends up at Davidson, ends up being, I think, the 8th pick in the draft the year he came out. And, a couple of injuries early in his career. There was a lot of question about Steph. Now Steph's the guy he is, but he graduated from this elite guard camp. Bradley Beal, the Washington Wizards, he's either their 1B or 1A, depending on what you think of John Wall. He graduated from this camp. Marcus Smart, Isaiah Thomas, the Boston Celtics star who's dealing with some hip issues right now. So, and there's a lot of others. I picked those 4 for my story as, to me, the big elite alums of this elite guard camp. But, a lot of NBA guys have gone through this CP3 Elite Guard Camp. And what's neat about it for Ty is, not only are you there with, 20 or 30 other elite guards at the high school, college level, wherever the case may be, guys who, I'm sure the process here, when you look again at the list of alums of this camp who are in the NBA now, you're talking about guys who, when Chris Paul and his group are picking out the guys to invite to this camp, they're picking out who they think are future NBA guys. And so, you're playing with other guys who were good, for 4 days. You're going through drills. You're going through game situations with those guys. I think that an understated part of this, because that's expected. You're going to compete with these guys. That's neat. I think what's a really important part of this is the stuff that you won't necessarily see on the floor. The drills and the game situation work, but the fitness, the just being able to work with Chris Paul and his other instructors. And I didn't see listed who the other instructors might be, but I imagine if it's guys who work with Chris Paul, we're talking about some interesting guys. And so, to me, a big benefit for Ty here is going to be also that off-the-court work. That work, sort of going through, film study, sitting down with Chris Paul and his instructors and being able to break down film, being able to break down situations, and also learning what they do, NBA guys do to get themselves in shape and stay in shape. It's a different thing. I mean, we love UVA and what they do and what Coach Curtis does to get the guys ready from a fitness and strength perspective at UVA. But learning what NBA guys do, he can take that back, actually, not only improve himself but improve his teammates. As Mike Curtis and his group, he can say, hey, here's some things that these guys do. Maybe we can add this to our repertoire. And so, really, really interesting opportunity here for Ty. And going through Ty's numbers, 10.6 points, 3.9 assists last year, played 30.8 minutes per game, 42% shoot from the field, 37.9% from three-point range, 90.5 from the free throw line. It'll be interesting to see how he comes out of this camp and what what we may notice about him. He really made great strides from his freshman year to his sophomore season. He was still overcoming. People forget about Ty, but in his senior year of high school, he had hip surgery. And hip surgery for any athlete, having anything wrong with your hips as an athlete in a sport that involves a lot of lateral mobility, speed, power, and that kind of thing can be an issue. But he actually ended up having issues with both of his hips. We forget about that and then think about as a freshman, he didn't play a lot until middle to late part of that freshman season. And he played in spurts. He came off the bench. He got some minutes in some games. Some other games didn't get a lot of minutes. Then last year, still you could tell that as a sophomore, the first part of the season, he was still kind of getting his game legs back under him, even from 2 years before. As the season went on, he became big shot Ty. He was a guy that you looked to hit the big shot late in the game, and he often delivered in that situation for the Virginia team. And he and Kyle Guy. I know Virginia plays a three-man backcourt, so we'll see where DeAndre Hunter, ends up playing. Does he play in the post? Does he play in the backcourt with those guys? But Ty and Kyle, arguably the best backcourt in basketball coming into this 2018-2019 season. So, the fact that Ty Jerome gets this opportunity means that Chris Paul and his folks think that he's an NBA prospect, and he'll get exposed to some high-level training on the court, and then the skill, the stuff off the court, the game study, the film study, all that work will be really beneficial, I'm sure, to Ty Jerome as his junior season unfolds. So really big news for Ty, and what a tremendous honor for him. So that's our that's talking some UVA basketball here, and it's some excuse at least to talk some UVA sports here. On the 1st of August. Season doesn't start until November 6th. I'm sure we'll have sometime, probably early October, we'll get the opportunity to first really kind of see the team, go for a media day, get to kind of kick the tires on this 2018-2019 Virginia team, and it'll be a neat opportunity. So, well, that's a quick podcast for the day, but it's the news of the day. Ty Jerome, the non-conference schedule being announced, and I think we'll end it there. Signing off for our abbreviated podcast today, I am Chris Graham. Wahoo wah.